The NFL draft is just over 2 weeks away, so people are finalizing their big board, people are finalizing their draft rankings, and today I have James Foster, NFL draft analyst for the 33rd team on, so we can discuss a few players on his big board. James, thank you so much for coming on. I'm looking forward to getting into some of these prospects. One in particular, I'm really looking forward to, a certain running back from a smaller school, which we'll talk about at the end. But first of all, what is your hottest draft take?
Man, so my hottest draft take, I think if I had to pick one, I would probably say that Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State goes on day three.
Oh, that's a good
Somebody
one.
that, occasionally you'll see in first round mocks, but pretty consistently like a top 50 player. And I don't really see NFL traits with him. I think like it's hard for an edge rusher to win in the NFL if you're like a technician, and I don't even think he's that technically advanced. So I kind of see him as like a fifth to fourth round pick. And I'm sure he'll get somewhat of a playoff bump. Just like I think owners probably like saw him in third round hits. They'll be like, hey, let's get that Jack Sawyer guy. But yeah, I would say Jack Sawyer goes on day three would be my hot take.
I like that one a lot. And if you think that of Jack Sawyer, then what do you think of Cameron Williams, considering that Jack Sawyer like worked him in the playoffs? And
Man,
that's probably quite a bit. That play, right? The play against Texas, the strip sack.
yeah.
That's probably a big reason as to why he's so high on some people's boards. So do you do you think the same about Cameron Williams?
Yeah, I'm shocked that Cameron Williams declared. He is, obviously he has the traits that I think are pretty enticing, just like with his size and length. But yeah, he's nowhere near being pro ready right now. So I also have a day three grade on him. He's 120 on my board. So I think yeah, two day three picks going at it in my opinion.
Fair, well, at least you're fair in your rankings. Now, what I want to get into first is going to be this wide receiver class. Now, everything we're going to see on screen in terms of the graphics, I like to think I can make some good graphics out of it. This is all James's stuff, and it looks a lot better than mine. So it's going to be linked in the bio if you want to go to his big board. But I'm going to get him to shout out all of his stuff at the end of the show. But if you want to check out more in the looks of what we're seeing now, then check that out in the link below. But first, James, what I want to talk about is this wide receiver class. Now, as a Tetairoa McMillan supporter, I'm very pleased to see that you're not quite in line with the Daniel Jeremiahs of this world, and you have him at 13 on your big board. But then I went through a bit of a roller coaster of emotion with your wide receiver rankings because I then was a little bit disappointed with Matthew Golden at 2. But then I was really surprised to see Luther Burden as your wide receiver 1, not including Travis Hunter. So that's where I want to start. Why is Burden your wide receiver 1?
I think that Luther Burden, had a very disappointing season in 2024 statistically. In my opinion, that really had mostly to do with his surrounding core. Got some dreadful quarterback play from Brady Cook, obviously dealing with the injury this year. But compared to 2023, he was kind of like an afterthought in Missouri's offense. A lot fewer targets. If you watch him in 2023, he was kind of the king of the slot fade. And there's a stat from Sports Info Solutions that he had 13 slot fade targets in 2023 that were catchable and only had 2 catchable slot fade targets in 2024. So that's one example of just kind of a big portion of his big play opportunities that were taken off the table. But I think, he's a great yak threat, led FBS and missed tackles force last year, can be kind of that, Debo Samuel, like that wouldn't be my comp, but he can kind of play in that role. But I actually think that he's a really complete receiver that can run a much more full route tree, gives you that downfield separation, extremely reliable hands. The blocking effort and some of the football character stuff that has come out is definitely concerning to me. Character and off-field stuff doesn't really play into my rankings, but I think purely on the field, he's the best receiver in this class, like you said, outside of Travis Hunter.
And with Burden then, so you obviously said that Brady Cook took a step back and kind of his usage within the Missouri offense kind of changed, right? He was kind of used more as like this like decoy eye candy guy rather than being like the focal point of the Missouri offense. Are you then? Do you think that still muddies the evaluation for you, or is the explanation of, well, Brady Cook took a step back, his role changed, his kind of opportunity also went back? Is that enough for you with regards to the 2024 and 2023 film, or are there a few more lingering doubts with Luther Burden?
I think his 2023 tape to me is enough to still feel pretty confident in his ability. I also thought, like, an interesting part of Luther Burden's evaluation is that Missouri faced the highest rate of zone coverage in college football. So there's, compared to a lot of other players, there's very few reps of Burden like going up against man coverage, which is kind of what you want to see and like base most of your evaluation on for a receiver. But I thought when he was facing single coverage, he showed like a lot more improved footwork and nuance as a route runner, actually in 2024. So I think when you look at kind of his resume as a whole, it's still enough for me to feel pretty confident in him.
And then Golden as your wide receiver too. Now, this is someone that I'm sure you have your guy, and I will ask you that soon as well. Someone that you just don't, you're not in line with the consensus. I say it's like Emperor's New Clothes. Someone's naked up on stage and you're just like, guys, I just don't, this guy's not wearing clothes. I'm not seeing this. Now, obviously, you're not alone in Golden at all, and that is the beauty of the draft, right? People see people differently. I want you to convince me that I'm an idiot for having Golden as my like wide receiver 5, 6, as like a firm second round receiver, not a wide receiver 2, firm first rounder.
So I think that he's one of the most efficient and skilled route runners in this class. He runs like a dig route exactly the way that Kyle Shanahan would draw it up. I think that any scheme that's predicated on attacking the middle of the field is going to love the way that he sets up in breakers. His size kind of gives him some issues against more physical press, but I think as playing a Z or a slot, like his release game and release package is really impressive. And then what really sells me on Matthew Golden over somebody like Kyle Williams, for example, who I think has a really similar skill set, is that Matthew Golden is just has incredible reliability at the catch point. They run a lot of those front pylon routes in the low red zone, and it's just incredibly tight windows. He's getting both feet in bounds, adjusting to the ball. He can work back to all of the Quinn Ewers underthrows deep down the field. I think that his hands are extremely reliable, and so he can be kind of that chain mover Z. I wouldn't necessarily bang the table for him as like a blue chip prospect. He's my wide receiver 2 this year, but he would have been my wide receiver 6 last year behind A.D. Mitchell. So I think that like this class, the way that I see it with this class is like after you get past the top 5, I can't even really argue with whoever you've got at like 8 or 9, because there's just really aren't any blue chip players, outside of those top guys. So it's kind of a free for all. But yeah, I think that to me, Golden's ability as a separator has him just a little bit above Tetairoa McMillan, and I don't really see the 4.29 speed on tape at all. I mean, he's getting hawked down from behind after the catch pretty consistently on tape. I would have had him as like a 4.47 guy, just purely based on the tape prediction, but. Yeah, he's my wide receiver 2, and I think that he is going to be a wide receiver 2 in the NFL. I think there's a chance that outside of Travis Hunter, none of these guys are like a team's number 1 option.
As a McMillan stan, I'm gonna take issue with that. But just quickly before we move on to McMillan, it was funny how on your profile of Golden you said he lacks elite, and you stressed elite. Like I don't want to say he lacks elite. You said he lacks elite, stress on elite athletic traits, and people will look at the 4.29 and go, well, James, what are you talking about? He ran a 4.29. And I'm completely in agreement with you. This is kind of like the thing with the draft, is that I'm kind of more pushing back on the hype around Golden rather than Golden as a player himself. I completely agree with everything that you've said, right? This guy can run a post like one of the best wide receivers in the class, right? And you say that plays in so many of these modern offenses, the Shanahan offenses. but I just saw an adequate athlete. Like, you hear people going like, "Oh, he's Stephon Diggs 2.0," and I know Diggs didn't test that well, but like he's kind of when I saw his tape, I was just left so underwhelmed by it. And I think really what you've said is perfect, kind of sums him up. And what I want to ask then is if he's not going to be, if he struggles with that physicality, 5'11", 191 pounds, can run good in breaking routes, is a nice route runner, good technician in that sense. In that Shanahan offense that you said he'd be a good fit for, does his lack of yards after the catch threat kind of impact him there? Or do you think that he can, in a role which more allows him to be creative with the ball in his hands, he would then step up to the challenge in that sense?
Yeah, I don't think he's a great yak threat. It's interesting. I went back and watched some of his 2023 tape at Houston, and like it's almost unrecognizable the role that they had him playing. Like he was a pure gadget in that offense. Like I watched all of his targets and it felt like half of them were screens. So it's pretty interesting. Like they barely even had him running downfield routes in that offense. So they obviously were higher on his yak ability there at Houston. But yeah, I mean, obviously, you'd like Matthew Golden to give you a little bit more after the catch, but I think like that's kind of one of the things that puts him in that like late first round grade. If he was more of a threat with the ball in his hands, he'd probably be somebody that would have like a mid to early first round grade for me.
And with now McMillan, the pièce de résistance of the wide receiver class for me, we see him very similarly as well, right? Like, size, ball skills, good movement for his size. He's good with the ball in his hands, not a vertical threat though, not great against press. I'm concerned that people are going to look at McMillan's height and his weight and, his body type essentially and pigeonhole him into being like a traditional X wide receiver, a la like a Mike Evans, right? Run vertical routes deep down the field. What do you think McMillan's ideal role looks like in an NFL offense?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that ideally he's a big slot. Like the best stuff on McMillan's tape is when he's given a runway to kind of build up some momentum, and he can kind of read the defensive back's leverage, make a quick move 5 to 7 yards down the field. Like he is a pretty crafty separator in those situations, but I just don't see the burst off the line of scrimmage to really threaten press coverage vertically, and so I don't really see him as an X ideally. I think definitely somebody that you want in kind of that power slot role. And, like if the NFL came out with kind of the reverse Mel Kiper law where you could only play quarters coverage, I might have Tetairoa McMillan as my number one player. Cause if you're telling me he's going to get a clean release every snap and just kind of work flat-footed corners, I like him in those situations.
Yeah, because I love on his tape, I think the plays that I love the most was when he was when he had that like cheat motion. He would start as the outside guy, he'd have that cheat motion into the slot and have, head of steam. He'd be running open. He's not a sharp cutter, obviously, but he's quite fluid. He's quite like, he can move quite well for his size. And I just see that like CeeDee Lamb role, like put him like kind of like 60-40 in the slot, like get him like having two-way goes. Like I think he'd feast in that offense, which is why I'm a big McMillan believer. It's more kind of that projection for me. But now looking at the quarterback class, so you've got obviously Cam Ward, QB1, great, love that. Shedeur Sanders, QB2, Milroe, QB3, and then Dart, Shook, McCord, Gabriel Howard. What would your QB strategy be for teams like the Giants, the Jets, the Steelers, if, say, Ward does go first overall to the Titans? Would you be kind of looking to, if you're the Steelers, take Sanders at like 21, or would you looking to trade back up into the first, or would you wait until the second, or would you instead kind of wait even later in the draft, maybe see if you can get a Dart or a Shook kind of later, like round 3 and later?
So I think that if you're the Steelers sitting there at 21 and you can get Shedeur Sanders, I think that's a perfectly solid pick. The one thing that I would really push back against would be taking Shedeur Sanders over a blue chip player, which in the Giants' case would be most likely Travis Hunter, potentially Abdul Carter. I think those are kind of like nobody's a sure thing, but those are players where like if they don't become Pro Bowl caliber players, I'm going to be very surprised. Like something went wrong there. And I think that like reaching on a quarterback just for need, I think would be a mistake over one of those players. Once you get later in the first round, my opinion would be different if we had like last year's non-quarterback class, where even in the teens you're still getting guys that you project as like super high level starters. I think once you get outside of the top 8 to 10 in this class, it's kind of like, maybe you're getting a guy that's going to be your number 2 defensive tackle, or kind of like a just quality starting guard or something like that. In that case, even though I do have Shooter Sanders at 34 on my board, like if you wanted to take him over somebody that you project as more of a mid-level starter, I think that's perfectly fine. So I would say that once you get outside of the top 10 or so, then I think taking Shooter Sanders is appropriate.
And then, so let's say that the Giants took him at 3, right? They said, we need a quarterback. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they're there to protect their jobs. They're taking Sanders at 3. What would your quarterback strategy be after that? Would you then definitely kind of look to take Milroe in the second, or would you be kind of, because the way I see it is that I think quarterbacks like Shook, McCord, and Howard, I almost prefer them at the value I'd get them at, if that makes sense. Like, I don't really believe any of these guys are franchise guys, right? When you're not getting last year's quarterback class. So would you feel better about waiting on quarterback, or is it like you say with these kind of the lack of blue chip talent overall? Would you think it's better to still get a middling potential quarterback as opposed to a middling, I don't know, defensive lineman, for example? So would you still go for the positional value even later?
Right. So I think with Shuck, now I don't really see this at all, but it seems like the NFL is a lot higher on Shuck, and he could be kind of that like fringe first rounder to second round guy. You never know if that's just like hype leading up to the draft, but like if you got to spend a top 40 or 50 pick on Shuck, I would not do that. But like if you're getting McCord in the 4th round versus Jalen Milroe in the 2nd, I might lean towards McCord. They're obviously different players. Like Milroe is somebody that you've got to have a specific plan for. He needs at least one redshirt year, but the potential is kind of like off the charts with him. So it really depends on like where you are as an organization. I see McCord as more of a guy that's ready to come in and play day one. Same thing with like Dylan Gabriel. Will Howard, I kind of see his ceiling as more of just a really good backup. But it depends on like where you are as a team. So the Rams, for example, like the Rams are a team that I might really be interested in Jalen Milroe, because you're going to have 1, maybe 2 more years of Matthew Stafford, and you've kind of got that like incubation situation just like ready to go for him. But Milroe's not a guy that I would want to draft if I'm like expecting to play him in year 1.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams are such an interesting landing spot, because I would love Dart to the Rams, like as that Matthew Stafford heir apparent. A bit like what you're saying with Milroe. I don't think Dart's ready to start year 1. Like his amount of snaps under center, kind of from the old Miz offense, like that guy needs to like continue to develop, like learn a pro style offense, and right. I would love that fit. But the Rams is, I think apart from Sanders and Ward, I think every quarterback in this class is hoping to go to the Rams with McVay and like have a year to learn under Stafford. And then defensively, so when I filtered on your kind of like big board that you have on your Twitter, and I filtered by linebacker, I was absolutely ecstatic because I didn't see Jalon Walker, and I thought me and you were on a level. But then I realized when I got to like LB5 and it was Chris Paul Jr. that you probably had him down as an edge and not as a linebacker. So are you worried then? Obviously, because that's the question with Walker. Some people are rejecting him. Like Daniel Jeremiah, like yourself, are looking at him as an edge. He says he's a hybrid linebacker, HLB. He wants to kind of do both. Obviously, like it's not really down to him; it's down to the coaches. Are you worried at all that the hybrid kind of ability counts against him in some senses, that if you are positionless, you're kind of closer to being a player without any position? Or is that why you're just like, he's going to be an edge, we don't need to deal with the coverage skills that he may or may not have, on him being a linebacker, he just projects athletically and kind of traits wise as a pure edge for me? Yeah,
I almost like don't even view him as a hybrid player, honestly. I mean, it's nice that he played linebacker, I guess, but I don't really think that his linebacker tape is worthy of getting drafted in the first 4 rounds. he's, pretty much never dropping back into coverage. Like any of his quote unquote coverage snaps are just him as a QB spy. So he's really got no experience there.
The Quinn Ewers tackle.
And then like, I didn't think the instincts really against the run were anything special. Like he does a good job playing blocks, I think, and obviously has the pursuit speed. But to me, like the only thing that's really impressive as like a day one draft pick with Jalon Walker is his pass rushing tape. And I mean, he's such an interesting player. It's kind of one of the frustrating things about the draft where like every conversation has to be relative to how other people are viewing him. Because when I watched his tape, back kind of December-ish, it's like there's no way that this is going to be a guy that I'm lower on, because like I love everything that he brings to the table, and then he's getting talked about as a top 5 pick. I'm like, wow, that's way too rich for a sawed-off, undersized pass rusher with like a small sample size of actual pass rushing tape. Doesn't really have great bend for his size. He is really explosive, but like not super flexible. Like I really like him. I think his high-end comp is Clay Matthews, but like he's 20th on my board. And then I think if obviously like the character and leadership stuff seems to just be A+ across the board. So if you want to bump him up a little bit for that, perfectly good there. But like, yeah, him being top 5 is kind of wild to me, I got to say.
There's always, I mean, I've said this is one of my takes, is that people argue is Shedeur Sanders a nepo baby because of the surname, and I don't think so, right? Like that, you have obviously completely different positions. I think Sanders has done very well to kind of separate himself character wise from his father. But I really think that the true nepo babies are the Georgia defenders, because if like someone like Jalon Walker isn't wearing red and black for the most part, right? I appreciate you're in the film, you'll be able to completely separate that out. But for a lot of people, especially in the media, when they just like look at a few plays or they see what team they play for, when someone plays for Georgia and they're athletic and they have all the tools, I feel like some people do like to turn the heat up on them a little bit on their draft board, which is why again I'm trying to I personally I'm more in line with you. I have him as like kind of like the early 30s, so we definitely see him quite similarly. And then with the running back class, so obviously Ashton Genty, one for you. I'll have all of them on the screen now. You've got Jaden Blue, RB9, absolutely love that. Quinshon Judkins at 11, controversial, but what I want to talk about here though is Lan Larison, the running back from UC Davis. Now, you said on your YouTube video in your running back rankings, you could make a case that Lan Larison is the best receiving back in this class, and I completely this guy's tape is electric, genuinely electric. So. He's one-handed catches for fun, around a 4.46 at the pro day. That'll play, no fumbles. I think you said it was no pressures allowed this year, or like 2 in his entire career, something like that. How early are you taking Lan Larison, and why is it before Quinshon Judkins?
Yeah, I don't quite know if it would be before Quinshon Judkins, but yeah. So I mean, he apparently tested really well at his pro day. It's still unverified numbers, but like ran a pretty good 40 time. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we'll see what the verified numbers look like. But yeah, I think just more one-handed catches than anybody on tape, like, and some just insanely disrespectful one-handed catches where like he doesn't even need to, and it's like 30 yards downfield. He's just plucking it with one hand, but like he can also reach back and adjust, make an adjustment, tip the ball to himself. He runs like real routes. They have him run corner routes. He can separate from defenders out of the break, and then like has ball tracking skills down the field. So yeah, I mean, I think he's the most underrated player in this class, because I've only ever heard, well, like I posted a video of him, and he's kind of started, I feel like it's kind of started to increase his buzz a little bit.
Yeah, you're a pioneer.
And but I heard Emory Hunt mention him, so that's like the one other time that I've heard somebody bring him up. But yeah, I mean, he's somebody that I think 5th round maybe is where I would start to think about him. But yeah, there's a chance that he could go undrafted just based on how little hype he's getting.
When you see him kind of with their logos, how you have the player kind of busts in the photo, and you have the logo of the school they play for. So you got Ohio State, you got Texas, and then you got this it doesn't look real. Like it looks like something you've make on like Madden or like NCAA or whatever.
Right.
Like you just kind of have this, and he's called Lan Larrington as well. Like it sounds like a made up, like a randomly generated NPC player, but he is
Yeah.
so damn like again because of your videos and because of other clips I've been able to find. Obviously, UC Davis film over here in the UK is pretty tricky to locate, but I've managed to find enough where I can be like, okay, I like what this guy is putting out there. Are there any other Lan Larringtons for you, like those guys who you're just like they're not getting enough buzz, maybe not as obscure? I'm not saying you need to come up with like Efton Chisholm, another FCS guy or anything like that, but are there any other guys that you're like, why are these players not being spoken about like they should be?
At any position?
Any position, just your favorite. Doesn't even need to be it can be someone in round 3 that you think should go in the first, just someone that's like being underappreciated.
Right. Let's see here. I think that maybe not quite that level of sleeper. Like he was a combine invite, but Zaw Frazier out of UTSA to me is somebody that I would have expected to get a lot more hype because, we had Tariq Woolen come out of the same school, and he's a very similar player, like in terms of his size and speed profile. Almost 6'3", over 33-inch arms. Ran a 4.36, had one of the best 10-yard splits of any corner at the combine, and then ranked second in the FBS among FBS corners with 6 interceptions in 2024. Like his tape is actually a lot better than Reek Woolen's coming out. I think he's a little bit scheme dependent. Like he isn't the most fluid transitioning and moving laterally, but I've got him 116 on my board. I think that he has just a really high ceiling as a press man or press cover 3 corner. And then the other guy that I would shout out is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the running back out of Arizona, who transferred from New Mexico. Only got to play 1 game this year because he had like eligibility ran out, but he's super dynamic, one of the more creative running backs in this class, and somebody that I think should be like, I don't think he'll go day 2, but 4th round, I would start to expect him to come off the board.
Because that was obviously when people are looking at Tetairoa McMillan, because he's one of the just pretty much where he started. He's the only receiver to have over 1,300 receiving yards in the last kind of like 2 years, and obviously watching that Arizona, I did a whole breakdown on McMillan. He's one of the players I've watched the most of. I could not bear to watch any more of that offense with Nerfafita like bailing out of clean pockets, and I wanted to scream. And a big kind of like missing piece is just like really anyone else doing anything. I know there's like an offensive lineman that will get drafted this year, but like having the running back there would have potentially been a bit of a game changer, especially at the college level. But finally, James, who is a prospect then? I mentioned the Emperor's New Clothes, and someone's standing up there naked, and you're just like, this guy's naked, and everyone's saying, no, look at his fantastic outfit he's got on. Who is a prospect that you just don't see it with at all?
Okay, so I mentioned Jack Sawyer. That would be one for me. I'll say Jahdae Barron out of Texas.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, I like that. Go on.
So I've got him 51 on my board, and like it's kind of similar to Jalon Walker, where when I watched his tape, I wouldn't have I finished watching a lot of these guys before the plugged in people start doing their mock drafts and stuff. So when I watch his tape, I'm expecting like, oh yeah, super fun, like 3rd round pick, big fan of his film, really smart player, great at the catch point, kind of a limited athlete, but like. Big fan of Jahdae Barron, and then I see him as like he's top 10 on people's boards.
He's 7 on PFFs.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, I got to be watching different tape than some other people. So I think like the thing with Jahdae Barron is that he played, I feel like by far the least exposed and like demanding coverage role of any corner in this class. I think he had like 50 man coverage reps in total. He's playing cover 3 almost every single snap. He's forget even playing press coverage. He's rarely even squared up with his opponent. He's almost always in a side turn and just like breaking on routes from zone coverage. And I think that as long as he's put in the right scheme, I think he can be like a solid starter. I just didn't really see a great athlete or anybody that's proven to be able to like play single tight man coverage on NFL receivers. So yeah, I mean, I still like the player. I just think where he's kind of projected, definitely a lot lower on him.
I love that, Shafi. That's a really good one. But James, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, on Twitter X at NoFlagsFilm, and doing positional rankings on YouTube. If you type in James Foster on YouTube, it should pop up.
Well, I implore everyone to go and do that because the film cut-ups on X and Twitter are absolutely fantastic. The Lan Larrington one notwithstanding, and also the YouTube stuff is brilliant. So make sure you go check out James's work. I've also got the big board linked in the bio. But James, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.